All right. Hello, everybody. Hope everyone is doing well. This is the NBA Tournament Strategy Show, where typically we take a look back at the night previously, but last night was the Super Bowl, and I also don't play NBA DFS on Sunday typically. So that's a thing. But we do have some things to celebrate from Friday, and there were a crap ton of wins over the weekend, but I wasn't added in them, to be honest. And so I didn't really look too closely, but I know there's some really good wins, and a lot of people won a lot of money yesterday. So congrats to all of you. This is my guy, Sacktown. On Friday, got third place in the FanDuel GPP. Was so close to taking it down, but still 3,500 is an awesome win. So congrats to you, man. Appreciate the support. I know you tune into the show quite often, so always appreciate your support, man. So yeah, this slate is gigantic. Another 11 gamer, if I'm doing my math correctly. But yeah, a large slate, a lot of questionable tags. So definitely a lot of things we can get into. For those of you that don't know, later today at 5:30 p.m. Eastern time, we have the pre-lock show. That's where we talk through leverage plays, core plays, guys that we're going under on. This show is more like tournament strategy, just theory, brainstorming some guys we might be interested in. But definitely do tune into the pre-lock show for what we're actually doing on this slate. You do have to be a VIP member for that, so definitely do click the link in the description. Feel free to use the promo code BOB if you would like to for a 10% discount. All right, I think that's everything. Let's jump into this slate, guys. It's going to be an interesting one. Brandon Tanguy, sorry, Tanguy, good to see you, man. Thomas Dye, good to see you as well. Thomas, I know you'll be interested. I'm probably going to 150 max this week. Last week, 20 maxing was fun and it went well. Nice to get that toolkit back and know that I can still do it at a pretty high level. But this week, I'm just going to 150 max more than likely. Probably most of next week, too, before I go back to 20 maxing again. Probably more than anyone wants to see. But let's jump into this slate for real this time. For the Hawks and Hornets, Trae Young is listed as probable. John Collins is listed as questionable. That's big. Bogdan Bogdanovic is listed as questionable. That's important. Sadiq Bey, one of my least favorite players because I rarely get him right, is available for this team. Garrison Matthews is expected to be available, and Bruno Fernando is expected to be available. I'm really hoping John Collins and or Bogdanovic do play just so I don't have to worry about the Hawks too much. This is a nice matchup against the Hornets, but with all these new pieces, we don't really know how usage is going to play out, and they're already a tough team to predict with just having Trae Young, DeJounte Murray on the same team. So not a spot that I'm trying to fade if we get the news that Collins or Bogdanovic end up being out. But if they're all healthy, a game that I'll feel a little bit safer not trying to force exposure to. So really a domination station play, but hopefully one I don't have to hyper focus on too much. Wagwan, good to see you. Kaboom. Always good to see you, man. For the Hornets, this is another interesting situation. Cody Martin's already been ruled out. Svai is expected to be available in this game. Kai Jones is doubtful. Kelly Oubre is out. The interesting situation here is that the Hawks are also a team that you can look to attack and not be overly concerned with. But the main guys that are on most people's radar tonight are your guys Mark Williams and Nick Richards. I need to look into what happened on Saturday because Nick Richards actually played more minutes off the bench than Mark Williams. So definitely something I want to dig a little bit deeper into. Because that's a little weird. Maybe it was foul trouble or something of that sort, but need to dig a little bit deeper there. But at their price tags, they're both still very viable. And against a Hawks team that's not really scary in the front court, I'm okay with going back with both of them. I want to see where ownership falls on these guys, but I plan on at least matching field exposure on them. I'm not really scared of going back to that well. Next up, we have the Spurs, one of the worst defensive teams in the league, against the Cavaliers, who are one of the better defensive teams, at least when it comes to their front court. So from the injury news standpoint, we have Keldon Johnson listed as probable. Trae Jones is out. Jeremy Sachan is listed as probable, so it looks like he's going to play. Romeo Langford is out, so at least we know that already. Oh, I forgot to mention, LaMelo Ball is definitely on my radar for the Hornets game too. That felt like a kind of obvious guy to consider, so I kind of overlooked him, but I definitely like his upside. I want to see his ownership before I figure out what I'm going to really do with LaMelo. But back to this game. Sachan probable, Romeo Langford out. Doug McDermott is listed as questionable. Charles Bassey is questionable. Devin Vassal's been out for a while. Kim Birch is out. Stanley Johnson was released, so we don't have to worry about him anymore, which I am happy about. But man, this team is a team that I don't love forcing exposure to. But Zach Collins at 4,500, we know the upside he brings to the table. Matchup is far from my favorite, so the way I'm thinking about it is that if he's relatively low owned, I'm willing to potentially force some exposure depending on how the center position plays out. But if he's pretty chalky, I'm probably not going to try and force that. Like, I'll let the domination station give me some of him, but I'll probably limit to what degree. Like, I wouldn't force a min percentage on him, if that makes sense. Devontae Graham is definitely someone that we have to continue to think about, which is fine. It makes sense. He is expected to come off the bench today. Oh, my screen just keeps pivoting back and forth between two settings. Sorry, guys. I think people are expecting him to come off the bench. They'll need his shooting in this matchup, so I'm fine with it. I think the expected projected lineup is like Wesley and Branham starting. Wesley has burned people a lot ever since he's been starting, whereas Branham is priced appropriately for his role in this team. So not really a situation I'm trying to force exposure to. Devontae Graham's probably the only guy that's really on my radar at this point, but even then, I'm not excited about it. From the Cavs standpoint, I want to see the ownership on Allen and Mobley. They're probably the guys that I'm the most interested in. Mitchell's a fine one-off play. Garland's a fine one-off play, but not a situation I think I'm going to force. But we'll know for sure by the pre-lock show. That spread is wild. A 15-point spread is scary. That's probably going to create almost next to zero ownership on them. So the odds of me forcing some exposure to this game is pretty high, if I'm being honest. Next up, we have the Pacers against the Jazz. From an injury news standpoint, the Jazz are pretty healthy. The only guy they're missing is Russell Westbrook because he hates the Jazz. So he's expected to not play tonight. He's not going to play tonight. The Pacers, they have Tyrese Halliburton listed as questionable. Miles Turner listed as questionable. Two pretty big names, guys, that we kind of have to worry about being out a pretty good bit because they both play a lot of minutes, both have a high usage rate. So if Halliburton and Turner end up being out on this slate, we're going to have a lot of Pacers. And I've been attacking both of these teams front court this season. And so I'm more than fine with playing some of their backups here. Tease is definitely viable. I mean, honestly, whoever ends up starting for the Pacers, I'm going to have some exposure to. Thankfully, this game is one of the first games on the slate. So we'll know this news ideally. And so definitely a situation that we shouldn't have to overthink because we should get the starting lineup in time. JJ, good to see you, man. Lori, you are not wrong, especially if Miles Turner is out. Lauri Markkanen is in a fantastic spot. Walker Kessler and Kelly Olynyk already project well, so they're definitely just as viable and more viable if Miles Turner ends up being out. Great way of thinking about things, man. It's not always who's going to get the minutes from this team, but it's also just a softer matchup as well. So yeah, I like this game. I like the game environment. I like it a lot more if Tyrese Halliburton and Miles Turner end up being out. The Jazz in general are all going to project well. Sexton has been performing very well as of late in the starting role without Mike Conley, so more than happy to go back to him. And if Tyrese Halliburton ends up playing, I'm okay with having a little bit of exposure to him. So yeah, long story short, after I've already made it long, I love this game. I plan on having a lot of exposure to it. Moving on, we have another game with a nice large spread of 13.5 points. We have the Rockets against the 76ers. Once again, Joel Embiid is listed as questionable. That's just the new normal at this point. If for some reason he ends up being out, we know what to do. Shake Milton is listed as probable. The Rockets, Kevin Porter Jr. is still out. This is a game that I don't love having exposure to, but Joel Embiid is definitely on my radar. Assuming he plays and assuming he has relatively low ownership, I can almost guarantee he'll be a leverage play for me today. Kanger, good to see you. Will you go over your 150 settings quickly on tonight's show? I'm MMing tonight. Nice, yeah, for sure. I'll definitely go over the settings that I use. Um, yeah, without a doubt, on the pre-lock show, we will do that. Uh, all right. On the Rockets side of things, I mean, like I said, Embiid is on my radar as a leverage play, unless ownership is ungodly high, and then I'll just pass on that. The other side of this, I don't really love forcing exposure to the Rockets, but I'm okay with some one-off pieces. There's no one who's really standing out for me as of right now, but I do plan on digging a little bit deeper into this to see if I'm overlooking anyone. Looks like projections like Jayshawn Tate and Terry Eason a little bit. We'll see if that sticks. Moving on, we have the Denver Nuggets against Miami Heat. This is a game that I thought was going to be pretty easy to just move on from, but of course, both of these teams just love having guys listed as questionable. So for the Nuggets, we have Jamal Murray listed as questionable and Aaron Gordon listed as questionable. Reggie Jackson is listed as TBD because everyone's expecting him to sign with them here soon after the Hornets bought out his contract. And then Zeke Naji is listed as out. We know how hot the Nuggets can get when Jamal Murray is out or when Aaron Gordon is out. If we get that news in time, I plan on forcing exposure to the other Nuggets, even though this matchup is tough. It's really hard to pick on the Heat at any position. If we find out Jamal Murray and Aaron Gordon are playing, I feel pretty comfortable just fading the Nuggets tonight, unless their ownership is just way too low. But if they're out, I'm just going to have to take some shots. That's just the way I play. For the Miami Heat, they have a long list per usual. Bam Adebayo is listed as probable, so he'll probably play, which makes it for a tougher matchup against Jokic for him. And then also Jokic has a tougher matchup against Bam. They usually match up pretty well against each other, so they don't tend to have ceiling performances in these spots. But again, if Jamal Murray and Aaron Gordon end up being out, I'm going to have to take the shot on Jokic. Tyler Hero is listed as questionable. That's huge for this team that's already missing Victor Oladipo and Kyle Lowry. I never like these situations, but I usually still have to do it. We've been burned by the Max Struces and Gabe Vincents multiple times, but I take the shot when they have more guaranteed minutes. I'm much more excited about these kind of plays if Hero ends up being out. Ooh, Kanger, thank you for letting me know. Hero's downgraded to doubtful. Oh, God. As soon as I say I feel more comfortable with it, I'm now much more nervous about it. But yeah, I mean, with Tyler Hero being doubtful, I'm going, and I'm assuming Vincent and Strus will be just super chalky. I also plan on having exposure to Jimmy Butler in this spot as well if Hero is out. There's really no one I'm not willing to play on the Heat just because Tyler Hero is such a high usage guy. So I don't love it, but I'm going to do it. It's a close spread too. I mean, I always take those kind of shots. Would love it if they're under owned, but I highly doubt they will be. I think everyone's going to be over those plays, so I doubt it's going to be sneaky by any means. Next up, Seth Curry for the Nets. Oh, well, we have the Nets against the Knicks. I should say that first. But for the Nets, Seth Curry is out. Outside of that, the Nets are pretty healthy. And then the Knicks have Mitchell Robinson listed as out, which is important. For the Nets, for me, Nick Claxton's a guy that stands out a little bit, but I don't like picking on the Knicks front court. So he stands out as like a play that makes sense, but not someone I'm super excited about. Julius Randle is probably the guy that I plan on having more exposure to. But again, just because there's some really good center plays already available, I don't really know how strong the power forward position is. That's kind of what I'm going back and forth on when it comes to Julius Randle, but he's someone that's on my radar, someone that I want to dig a little bit deeper to as a potential leverage play, once again, depending on where ownership falls. Cam Johnson, Bridges, both have looked solid. Oh, where's Cam? Yeah, Cam Johnson's projecting okay. And then Mikal Bridges is projecting all right as well. They're on my radar. Not guys I think I'm going to have to force on a slate like this unless they're just not owned at all. Not my favorite spot that game, but there's some interesting pieces, so I don't want to forget about it. Yeah, JJ, Miami is the absolute worst with this. I feel like 8 times out of 10, a guy ends up being out and they're still awful just because of the way they play. And the super value guy who's just cheap and going to play a ton of minutes does absolutely nothing out there. But every once in a while, everyone else is like, "Oh, I'm sick of this. I can't do it." It hits. And I've had one of my 100K wins came from playing a crap ton of Miami guys because everyone else was sick of it. So I have seen and I know from personal experience that if you stick with it, eventually it can work out. But it's a painful experience trying to get there. Tan guy said, every time I play Jimmy Butler, it's a puke play. Yeah, at least we know going in that it sucks playing him, but it does not make it better when you lose with him and he has a freaking snowflake. But hey, hopefully we can find a reason to be more optimistic about it later after I dig a little bit deeper into some of the matchups and things of that sort once things adjust to Tyler Hero more than likely being out. But we'll see. Definitely not a fun team to play by any means, but sometimes I have to embrace the pain a little bit and just try to feel something. Next up, we have the Bulls against the Magic. The Bulls have Alex Caruso listed as questionable, Javonte Green out, Lonzo Ball out. For the Pelicans, CJ McCollum is questionable. Again, I told y'all this questionable list is just going to keep increasing and increasing. So that's super important because if he ends up being out, Brandon Ingram is a much more interesting play on this slate, even though the matchup isn't my. Okay, Magic. Bulls are facing the Magic. It was one game too far. The Magic have Chuma Okeke listed as not on the injury report, and then RJ Hampton is not with the team. So nothing too crazy for the Magic. Caruso being questionable does matter, but honestly doesn't move the needle for me too much. Let me look at the sim model right quick for its thoughts on Vucevic. It doesn't love him too much. I was gonna say, out of these three, Vucevic was probably the guy that I was interested in the most. I'm gonna keep an eye on him throughout the day, but just not a spot that I'm trying to force. At least not as of right now. Wendell Carter Jr., I know he was doing pretty well on Friday, I believe, but matchup against the Bulls is pretty average. Wendell Carter Jr. Okay. Simotto likes him a little bit. Likes Fultz a lot more. The Magic, I'll be honest, guys, I have a strong bias against the Magic. I just don't tend to force a lot of exposure to them. I'll more than likely have a little bit of exposure to Fultz just because of the sim model's love for him, but that could change throughout the day. So definitely I'm going to keep an eye on that. But he's on my radar simply because of that reason. Looks like Suggs and Caruso and Williams are projecting pretty well. If I get some exposure to them, I'm fine with it. But this is just not a game that I'm super excited about, to be honest. So there's that. We'll let the DS do its thing, but those guys are not going to be core plays for me. I know that right now. Tan Guy said that's how we win. Tan Guy, you are not an amateur anymore. You've had multiple 4-figure wins, if not 5-figure wins that I'm missing. Like, you are very, very far from an amateur at this point, my guy. All right. But, if you want to keep that, you can call yourself what you want to. For the Pelicans, I talked about CJ McCollum being out. Being questionable. If he ends up being out, I really, really, really like Brandon Ingram. Everyone else will too, but I plan on being over the field on him. If CJ McCollum ends up playing, this is still a decent matchup. CJ will probably come in at reduced ownership. That's a spot that I would consider as a potential leverage play. And then SGA, well, the Thunder are relatively healthy at this point. They only have Poku and Shet out, who are guys who've been out for a while. SGA is always on my radar. I don't like picking on the Pelicans very often. So I doubt this will be a leverage play for me. But if he's, again, common theme, if he's insanely low owned, then I'll have to consider it. But not my favorite spot picking on the Pelicans, to be honest. So really, the only thing that will really move the needle for me in this game is if we get the news that CJ McCollum's out and or he's just very low owned and I force exposure to CJ. For the next game, we have the Mavericks against the Timberwolves. Let's see. Rudy Gobert's questionable. That's the usual. Kyle Anderson's also questionable per usual. And then Cat is out. Mike Conley joined this team. Mike Conley is just a fine player these days, not really someone you need to try and force exposure to. But he's still someone I like to try to keep an eye on just in case he does become more explosive on this new team, perhaps in a new role. Just something I need to keep an eye on. Anthony Edwards is always on my radar. So depending on where his ownership is, he could be viable. As y'all know, I don't like picking on the Mavericks. They tend to play at a very slow pace and just not a spot I try to force exposure to, like I said. On the other side of this game, the Mavericks, they have Tim Hardaway Jr. listed as questionable. That could be interesting, but man, with Doncic and Irving being on the same team, eating into each other's usage rates and being so expensive, it's hard to try and force exposure to the Mavericks unless you just have a really strong, unless something's really popping for you. So a spot I'm going to look into, but more than likely, I'm not going to have a ton of exposure to this game. All right, next up, 2 more games to go. We're doing great on time. Beautiful, beautiful. All right, for the Wizards, we have Kyle Kuzma listed as questionable. Will Barton is out. For the Warriors, Andrew Wiggins is listed as questionable. That matters. Curry's still out. Peyton's out. So a spot once again where Jordan Poole's going to be probably one of the stronger plays on the slate at 7,800. We talked about it a little bit last time, but he's been having ceiling performances even with Klay Thompson still in the lineup. Matchup against the Wizards doesn't really scare me too much, so I'm definitely interested in him here. You can attack this Warriors team pretty much wherever you want to. Kristaps Porzingis is a big that does stand out. Let me look and see what the sim model thinks about him. Not a fan. So, I mean, Porzingis is on my radar. I wish he was a little bit cheaper. The $9,900 price tag seems a little bit too high for me to stomach, honestly. I want some exposure to the Wizards tonight, but they are not coming in at a discount. I get it. It's smart that DK priced them up or else they would be the super chalk on this slate. But those price tags are hard to stomach. Hopefully they're low owned, so I can take a shot on one of them. If Kuzma ends up being out, he's currently listed as questionable, as I mentioned, then that's definitely a huge boost to Porzingis and Beal and some of the other guys on this team as well. So really a wait and see kind of situation for me as of right now. No one that I'm really trying to force exposure to on the Wizards, but Jordan Poole is probably the guy that stands out for me the most on the Warriors. So we'll see where ownership falls and we'll make our decisions from that. But no one's really popping out to me too much as of right now. And then last game on the slate, we have the Lakers against the Portland Trail Blazers. Let's see. JJ said, "LO, you're great at the sports you do play." Talking about tan guy, you are not wrong, man. JJ said, "I'm tired of this Gobert-ish. He's trying to be on the same level as the studs with GTD every game." Yeah, exactly. It's like you're not an Embiid, you're not LeBron. I don't like to put AD on a high pedestal, but you're not AD. You can't be questionable every game, Gobert. That's just not you. Tenge, I said, you got to zig when they zag. That's literally 80% of DFS, in my opinion. Or at least the way I've been playing DFS is just see what everyone else is doing and then eat some of it, but then zag in a few other spots, which we talk about on the pre-love show. This Lakers game is a game that I plan on having a decent amount of exposure to. The Lakers are pretty healthy outside of LeBron James being listed as questionable and Mo Bamba still being out for the suspension from when he was on the Magic. The Trailblazers, on the other hand, have Jerami Grant listed as questionable, which matters because he's a relatively high usage guy. If Grant ends up being out, then I plan on having a lot of exposure to Simons. He sees a 9.2% increase in usage rate when Grant and Nurkic are both off the floor. So that's huge. Plan on having a lot of exposure to him if we get that news in time. On the other side of it, not the other side of it, but Damian Lillard also stands out a lot for me in this spot. I want to see where his ownership falls. I think he's probably going to be pretty popular on this slate. So that always decreases my excitement on guys like that. D'Angelo Russell had 6 assists on Friday. So solid spot for him. But from a DFS standpoint, 7,300, not a spot that I get excited about. So primarily, this game is more interesting to me if Grant ends up being out, because that's just going to force my exposure to Simons. I plan on having some Lillard exposure pretty much no matter what. LeBron James is usually not a guy I try to force in the lineups. And then because Nurkic is out, Eubanks and Watford are going to project well. And if the nomination station likes them, I'm fine with it. If I don't get enough exposure to Eubanks, he's someone that I would consider forcing exposure to as a potential leverage play, but very TBD. We just kind of need to see what happens from an ownership standpoint. Per usual, nothing too crazy there. Mega Royal, good to see you. Gobert's toughness needs to be questionable every slate. You are not wrong, man. That's the real questionable tag. God, Gobert's so freaking annoying. Kaboom said, shout out to Tan Guy with the NFL takedown yesterday. Nice. I didn't even know about that. I didn't even see that, man. Like, Tan Guy, you didn't even bring it up. That's very humble of you, but you got to let us know. Another DFS Army member freaking out there crushing it. And there were Tan Guy, that's like a takedown's freaking awesome, especially in a showdown that's as large as the Super Bowl showdowns are. So awesome job to you. And there were a lot of wins yesterday. So if I missed, I didn't really bring it up. So I missed everyone. So congrats to everyone who had really good days yesterday in the NFL. So did a great job there. The NFL season's over now. So I kind of have, is it like NFL depression? I don't know. I'm going to miss it. Brandjoy, you're right. I totally overlooked that. I see when Wendell Carter Jr. was on the Bulls, though, I really didn't even think about him very much, though, which is why, like, in my mind, I didn't even consider it a revenge game because I feel like he's so much better now in the Magic. But he was impactful with the Bulls. I just feel like I didn't play him a lot for some reason. But that's something else to watch out for. I'll keep an eye on him, even just for the narrative. I love narratives. So, all right, everyone. Like I said, we will dig deeper into what we're actually doing on the pre-lock show today. Talk through settings, and we'll talk through leverage plays, core plays, guys that I'm a little bit under on in more detail, because on that show, I show what I'm actually doing, and it's a lot less theory. So appreciate everyone for sticking around and, helping me this show be easier just with the conversations and things of that sort. So appreciate the support. I hope you'll have a great rest of your day, and I'll see y'all later. Peace out.